Hi guys, chapter 15 is going to talk about employee recruitment, selection, placement, and indoctrination, otherwise known as onboarding. So we're going to look at national and regional trends for professional nurse staffing, how to determine staffing needs, recruiting, interviewing, selecting, and placing personnel. So let's just get started. With staffing, the leader manager recruits, they select, they orient, and they onboard personnel to accomplish the goals of the organization. Staffing steps are sequential in nature, and you can see those listed in your book. And we're going to look at these steps shortly. Staffing is an especially important phase of management process because organizations are usually labor intensive, meaning many employees are required to accomplish that organizational goal. And we know that many healthcare organizations are 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and patient demands and needs can be varied. Retention is huge these days. The harder you work your employees, the less job satisfaction you'll receive. So being aware of these demands is vital for that leadership team. So here are our sequential steps in staffing. These steps include determining the number and type of personnel needed, recruiting them, interviewing them, selecting, and then assigning them based on job descriptions. They're going to use organizational resources to induct and orient that new staff, making sure staff is adequately socialized to the organizational values, and being creative and flexible in scheduling based on patient care needs, so that productivity and retention can be increased. So what are some factors that affect staffing needs? We can talk about the source of nursing pool. Does the facility have a pool of nurses that can float or be called in when staffing needs are short? How about the number of students enrolled in local nursing schools? If we look at those nursing school enrollments, that can maybe help us determine if shortages are on the rise or if being patient will be a key in resolving some of the staffing issues. And we know post-pandemic, for a couple years, we did have some decline in our enrollment, but I feel like we are on the uptick for that. How about usual length of employment of newly hired staff? How long does the staff stay? What is driving them out if the stay is short term? Patient care delivery system in place is definitely a factor. How about the knowledge level of needed staff? Does the staff need better resources to help them fulfill their job requirements so job satisfaction is high? Are there any budget constraints that are that aren't allowing staff to be hired? What is the times of high patient census? Patient census can vary throughout the year. For instance, our peds population, we have high census in the winter, RSV, influenza, and in the summer, we see bug bites, broken bones, right? So there's that fluctuation where more nurses may be needed. And then what are peak staff resignation periods? Determining when these resignation times are happening, and then why are they happening? When we talk about supply and demand, we can break it down like this. For demand, we expect the RN demand to continue or even accelerate. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, nursing will be listed as one of the top occupations for job growth through to 2024. Demands for RNs will also be driven by technology advances and preventative health care. We have seen a huge increase in technology with the pandemic. As the life expectancy increases and individuals are surviving serious illnesses and living longer with chronic diseases, more nurses will be needed. Magnet status can come into play because most magnet hospitals prefer to hire baccalaureate graduates, making it more difficult for associate and diploma nurses to find jobs. When we think about supply, nursing school enrollment has increased steadily post-pandemic, but the increases are not keeping up with the nurses that are retiring. So the other concern with supply is that nursing education is limited with clinical sites, classroom space, nursing faculty, and clinical preceptors, with some qualified applicants are turned away. Solving that nursing faculty shortage may be the greatest obstacle to solving the nursing shortage, right? If there's not faculty to teach the new nursing students, aren't going to have a school to go to. Hospital downsizing and short-sightedness regarding recruitment and retention contributed to the beginning of an acute shortage of RNs in many healthcare settings in the late 1990s. The quality and safety movement made the public aware of just how important an adequate staff of healthcare providers was to ensure patient safety. Typically, nursing shortages occur when the economy is on the upswing and decline when the economy recedes. Historically, when the economy improves, nursing shortages occur. When the economy declines, nursing vacancies rates decline as well. In order to decrease health disparities in populations served, leaders should seek to proactively recruit and hire staff with varying age, gender, cultural, ethnic, and language diversities. So what if you are seeking employee diversity? Diversity encourages self-awareness and respect for all persons. Embracing each individual, it can bring new perspectives to thinking and problem solving. Organizations that lack diversity can be again linked to health disparities. Diversity in healthcare need to be looked at as inseparable. So let's talk a little bit about recruitment. This is the process of actively seeking out or attracting applicants for existing positions, and it's an ongoing process. Wise leader managers will recruit and surround themselves with people of ability, motivation, and promise. Before organizations start the recruitment process, the organization must ask themselves why the prospective employee would choose to work for them over the competition. Some of the factors affecting recruiting can be monetary and non-monetary, financial resources, adequate nursing pools, competitive salaries, what's the organization's reputation, the location, desirability, and the status of national and local economy can all be factors that can affect recruiters. So how do facilities recruit? They can recruit using advertisements, they can put on career days, they can put out some literature, but the biggest method is word of mouth by those satisfied employees. The recommendation of the organization by satisfied employees will help recruit and retain new employees. Recruiting is less difficult if the organization is located in a progressive community with several nursing schools, and the organization has a good reputation for quality patient care and fair employment practices. High employee engagement have a lower turnover rate than those with low engagement. Recruitment, however, is not the key to adequate staffing in the long term. Retention is, and it occurs only when the organization is able to create a work environment that makes staff want to stay. These environments are called healthy work environments, and they can provide safety, empowerment, and satisfaction to the employees in that environment. Turnover is normal and actually can be desirable. Turnover helps organizations with fresh ideas and reduces the probability of groupthink, in which everyone shares similar thought processes, values, and goals. However, excessive or unnecessary turnover reduces the ability of the organization to produce its end product, and it can be very expensive. Your book states that the replacement cost of an RN ranges from $22,000 to $64,000. If you have a high turnover rate, this could cost the facility millions of dollars. So decreasing your turnover rate, even if it's small, could save hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. Interviewing is the most common method for employee selection used by managers. Interviews are defined as verbal interactions between individuals for a particular purpose. Tools such as testing and references may be used, but the interview is the accepted foundation for hiring despite its limitations of reliability and validity. Interviewing is the most time-consuming and most costly tool that is utilized. It generally requires an interviewer to use judgments, biases, and values to make decisions based on a short interaction with an applicant. Thus, reliability and validity should always be suspect. So what is the purpose of the selection interview? The purpose or goals of the selection interview are really threefold. The interviewer wants to obtain enough information to determine the applicant's suitability for the position. The applicant must obtain enough information to make a decision on if this is a good fit for them if the job is offered. The interviewer must conduct the interview in a way that even if the fit isn't right for this applicant, the applicant still respects the organization. Interviews can be conducted in a structured, semi-structured, or unstructured manner. The unstructured interview requires little planning. Goals for hiring are unclear. Questions are not prepared, and the interviewer does most of the talking. This type of interview continues to be the most common selection tool used today. This is the one where you drop off the application and they're like, come on back, let's go get an interview, right? Unstructured. The semi-structured interview requires some planning because it's more focused and directed at major topic areas. The structured interview requires great planning. Questions are developed in advance to address job requirements, and all applicants get the same questions. The structured interview is a much better predictor of job performance and overall effectiveness than the unstructured interview. We do have to take in consideration the reliability and validity of our selection process when using interviewing as a tool. Validity increases with a team approach. So having more than one person interview the job applicant reduces that individual or personal bias. We have to minimize our biases. Negative feelings should not have any relation to the criteria necessary for success of the applicant in that position. We all know when we hear something negative, it typically weighs heavier than the positive information. So in order for this selection process to be valid, interviewers have to use the same standards on all applicants, meaning that structured interview has greater validity than unstructured interviews. So what are some of the limitations of the interviewing process? The major defect of the hiring interview is subjectivity or unconscious bias, which can never be totally eliminated. High interview assessments do not necessarily correlate with high-level performance on the job. Many people think they are better interviewers than they really are. Validity and reliability will definitely vary, but the following findings are typically accepted. Iterator reliability is high because the same interviewer will consistently rate the interviewees the same. If different interviewers conduct unstructured interviews of the same applicant, the ratings will be inconsistent and the iterator reliability will be low. Iterator reliability is better if the interview is structured and uses the same format by both interviewers. Interviewers tend to make up their minds about hiring applicants within the first 30 to 60 seconds of the interview. If the environment is artificial, interviewees have difficulty relaxing and acting naturally. If the interviewer has poor communication skills, this can limit the interview from generating a discussion. The interviewee's appearance can limit or contribute to opinions by the interviewer. So make sure you're professionally dressed. That's vital in this process. And then as you start thinking about that interviewing process, making a good first impression is key. Remembering that the interviewee is going to make a quick decision about you within the first 30 to 60 seconds of the interview. So how can we overcome some of those limitations that we just talked about? We can use a team approach. Again, having more than one person interview the job applicant reduces those biases. We can develop a structured interview format for each job classification. So having the job description, knowing the educational experience required for each position prior to the interview is very helpful in maintaining that structured format. We can use scenarios to determine decision-making ability. As you're obtaining answers to a particular set of questions, the interviewer should also be assessing the applicant's decision-making abilities. These scenarios for nurses could include patient care situations, how the applicant would use clinical judgment, and decision-making skills. We can conduct multiple interviews. Applicants should be interviewed more than once and on separate days. This helps an applicant to still have some potential for hire if they may be having a bad interview day. Provide training in effective interviewing techniques. Leaders and managers should not be expected to make appropriate hiring decisions without being adequately interviewing technique trained. So let's talk about some suggested interview formats. When we talk about planning, conducting, and controlling the interview, this slide is really suggesting a format that can be followed. Prior to the interview, make sure all interviewers know the appointed interview time. Make sure they're showing up on time, that there is time for the interview, and that the interviewers have access to the application for the applicant. As you follow the suggested format here, it's important to create and maintain a comfortable environment throughout this entire interview process while maintaining charge of the interview. Prior to terminating the interview, always encourage and include ample time for questions from that applicant. If the applicant is not qualified, the interviewer should not give any false hope and instead advise the person as soon as possible that he or she does not qualify for the position. There's nothing worse than getting all the way through to the interview, asking questions, and them telling you, I'm sorry, you don't qualify for this position. As soon as a leader manager knows they don't qualify, they need to let them know immediately. After the interview, the interviewer should take time to evaluate the applicant and the interview performance. If notes were taken, notes should be reviewed as soon as possible because it's fresh in their mind. The final question for the interviewer to answer is recommendation for or against hiring. And the two aspects that carry the most weight are the requirements of the job and personal bias. When we think about the requirements of the job, no matter how interesting or friendly the applicant is, they need to have the basic skills for the job to qualify for the job. Interviewers also have to take the consideration that overqualified applicants could be unhappy in the job. The other weighted aspect is personal bias. It is important that the interviewer examine any negative feelings that occurred during the interview that will usually have no relation to the criteria necessary for success of the applicant in this position. So what are some things we can do wrong as the applicant? When we show up too early, we appear over anxious and nervous. Saying too much, being vague, rambling, or evasive all show poor communication skills. If you are unsure how to respond to the question, take a few moments to reflect on the question before answering. We've talked about how to dress and why that's important. Questions about wages, benefits, and advancement opportunities should come later in that interview process. Don't ever badmouth or reveal confidential information about a current or former employer. Make sure you come with some questions. No questions shows that you haven't invested yourself in the position and carefully taken the time to think about questions to ask. Don't boast about yourself. Be very matter of fact about your accomplishments. Avoid the "what can you do for me" type interview questions initially. Make sure you're saving those questions about salary, benefits, vacations until you've actually been offered the position. And don't be afraid to know your 3-year or 5-year plan for your career. Having a lack of direction may turn the interviewee off. Showing apathy or lack of motivation will not make a good first impression. 30 to 60 seconds, guys. You will want to be enthusiastic, smiling, and showing emotion with the conversation. Just as there are things that the interviewer should do to prepare for the interview, there are things the applicant can also do to increase a satisfactory interview. Do your homework. Know about the organization that you're applying to. Obtain their philosophy and their priorities. If you know someone on the inside of the organization, find out about those philosophies and how it's implemented into practice. Schedule an appointment for the interview. There may be times when you drop off the application, they'll want to draw you in for an impromptu interview. Try to get a scheduled appointment for that interview. Practice response to potential interview questions. It's difficult to spontaneously answer interview questions about your personal philosophy of nursing, your individual strengths, your weaknesses, even your career goals if you haven't given it advanced thought. On the day of the interview, be prompt to give yourself time to collect your thoughts and be mentally ready. Look your best, dress conservatively, and make sure you're neatly groomed. Jewelry should be kept at a minimum, and avoid wearing perfume or any aftershave. Remember that interviewers will make up their minds about you early in the process, so making a first impression is essential. Don't be late. We've already talked about getting there too early, which causes you to be over anxious. So make sure you're there prompt so that you can be mentally prepared. Don't avoid eye contact. Smiling will decrease your anxiety and that of the interviewer. Greet your interviewer formally and stay standing until given permission to sit or the interviewer sits. Don't fidget with personal belongings. Don't slouch. Don't chew gum or smoke cigarettes. Bring paper and pencil to take notes, and then answer the questions with confidence and watch the interviewer for any nonverbal cues. I know some of these sound silly, but you would be amazed. So what are some practice interview questions? Practice responses to potential interview questions. Again, it's difficult to spontaneously answer questions about yourself, your strengths, your weaknesses, your goals, if you haven't thought about them. So some of the questions you may hear in your interview: why do you want this job? What's your philosophy? What are your strengths and weaknesses? Why should we hire you? What is your 20-year career plan? That's pretty lengthy. Typically, you're going to hear 3 to 5 years. Can you define professionalism? What do you know about our organization? Take the time ahead of time to be thoughtful so that you're able to answer those questions. During the interview process, the organization must be sure that the application form doesn't contain questions that violate various employment acts. Likewise, the interviewees must also avoid inquiries during the interview. Inquiries include age, marital status, children, race, sexual preferences, finances, national origin, religion. Those all must be avoided and cannot be asked. They're deemed illegal and can be discriminatory to the applicant. At the end of the interview, shake the interviewer's hand, thank them for taking the time to talk to you. It's also okay at this time to clarify when the hiring decision will be made and how you will be notified about the outcome. Sending a thank you note or email to the interviewer is also very appropriate. Just make sure you address the note or email with the correct spelling and title. If the applicant is offered the position, a formal letter should be sent accepting or rejecting that position. So after applicants have been recruited, they've completed the applications, they've been interviewed, the next process is selection. So selection is the process of choosing from among applicants the best qualified individual or individuals for a particular job or position. During this process, they're looking at qualifications, work history, deciding if the applicant is a good match. Leader manager's biggest mistake with the selection is speeding through that process, which could lead to hiring the wrong person. Considerations need to be given to educational and credential requirements, reference checks and background screenings. Positions should never be offered until information on the application has been verified and references have been checked. Any unsolicited information obtained about the applicant may not be used to reject the applicant unless justifiable for disqualification exists. Pre-employment testing. This can help assess applicants' fit for the organization. This assessment can help predict performance, compassion, and likelihood that the individual will remain with the organization. This testing can and should be considered alongside interview results and reference checks, not just used as a standalone test. And then physical examination. This may help identify applicants who potentially have unfavorable attendance based on requirements of the position. Hiring can be one of the most difficult aspects of a manager's position because hiring the wrong person or a poor choice could cost the employer 1 to 1.5 times a person's annual salary. It could decrease morale and delay growth of the organization. So let's talk about placement. The astute leader is able to assign a new employee to a position within his or her sphere of authority where the employee will have a reasonable chance for success. If the employee is not matched well, it will often lead to lower work engagement, lower productivity, and greater turnover. Onboarding is kind of a new-ish term, and it refers to the process by which new employees are introduced to the social and performance aspects of their job, with the goal of getting new hires adjusted quickly, increasing productivity and job satisfaction, and reducing turnover. When onboarding is done well, it establishes favorable employee attitudes towards the organization, the unit, and the department. Onboarding starts as soon as a person has been selected for a position and continues until the employee has been socialized to the norms and values of the work group. The 3 phases of onboarding include induction, orientation, and socialization. Effective onboarding programs result in higher productivity, fewer rule violations, reduced attrition, and greater employee satisfaction. Induction is the first phase of onboarding. This takes place after the employee has been selected for the position, but before performing the job role. The induction phase includes all activities that educate the new employee about the organization and employment and personnel policies and procedures. Induction provides general information to that employee. Orientation helps the employee learn more about activities specific to their new position. The purpose of the orientation process is to make the employee feel like part of a team. This will reduce burnout and help new employees become independent more quickly in their new role. And that concludes chapter 15. If you have any questions, you can shoot me an email or we can chat about it in class. Thanks, guys.